No reason.
No, no.
Just yes.
It was really funny
I would.
this week on I can't remember what the name of the Weekly is. It the Charlie
Yeah.
Pickering show.
Yeah.
He's,
Every show on the ABC, but yeah, the Weekly is one of them. The
Yep.
Weekling. Yeah.
He's saying, thanks to the Google and Facebook threats, etc. People are having to imagine a world without Google, where answers are just not there at your fingertips. And he says, well, that's all of my childhood.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty well until the internet existed.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's so fun. Do you remember having to look up things in encyclopedias?
I'm not even sure that I did. Like, I just remember not knowing things.
Yeah.
The biggest thing for me about the internet and Google and all those sorts of things is actually music. Like, my old person story is about listening to Triple J, having to write down some lyrics or something, or sit in a car park until the back announcement came about the song that you'd just listened to, jotting it down on whatever pen or whatever you could, with whatever pen or something you could find in the backseat of your car. Then having to go to the record store and saying, look, I have, heard this song. Can you get it for me? They check on their database if they can get it. And then they have to order it in for you. So, from when you actually heard the song on the radio to when you had it in your hand, if that was even possible, it was weeks, sometimes months.
Yeah. Yep.
And then you got it and you were like,
exactly.
this is amazing. And then you had to get home, right? or at least in your car or something, if you had a CD player in your car. So that's my old person story about all of that. Whereas now, I'm at the gym and I'm like, oh, this is a pretty upbeat, hip musical tune, It gets my blood pumping.
Yeah.
Gets the endorphins going.
Now you can Google everything about the artist, Google everything about the song and what inspired it.
Yeah, I hit a button. It comes up. Do you want to open this in Apple Music? Yes, I do. Do you want to save it to a playlist? Yes, I do. And it's done. Like 3 buttons, 20 seconds, and I've got the song,
Yeah.
Which is great. But anyway, that I don't remember. Like the first few things I looked up on the internet, I remember looking up Silverchair on the internet. And Googling them I don't even know if it was Google, but just finding out about them and
AltaVista.com.
Yeah, AltaVista.com. Yahoo was big. Flickr.
That was reasonably recent, I think. Flickr. That's for photos.
Yeah, MSN chat, whatever that was called.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Anyway.
Yes. Fond memories of the early years of the sound. There are some the sound of the dial-up modem.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, it's not like we've got internet dramas now. It's all smooth sailing now.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Anyway,
It was fun reminiscing. But it is funny,
It is funny.
People say, can you remember a time before the internet? Yes, absolutely.
Well,
I remember when we had a question that we were disputing on Trivial Pursuit in our family living room, and somebody had to run to the collection of encyclopedias to find the answer.
Yeah. I mean, look, the internet has certainly thrown a spanner in the works when it comes to Scrabble, right? Because of places like Urban Dictionary and things. You go, well, does that count? It's a word. People use it,
For example, moobs is a word now.
No, it's not.
It is. It's a real word, moob.
I'm gonna guess at what that is, but I don't know if we need to go down that path. Oh, dear me. All right. Hello. Hi, and welcome. Hello and welcome to The Pouch, the podcast equivalent of air drumming to classical music that aims to take a not-so-serious look at the week in Australian news and politics. I'm Greg. Misreading that news headline certainly kept my mind occupied for the whole day. Savage.
And I'm Jake. Thankfully, I can still find out what things shocked a random Woolworths customer from Yahoo News Far Wharton. That kind of makes me sound like Yahoo News far wouldn't. Anyway, and on today's episode, we talk missing senators, empathy in politics when it matters, Facebook's gamble, and so very much more, Greg.
I'm very much looking forward to it, Jake. And in the spirit of reconciliation and recognition, we acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land on which Jake and I are podcasting today. We recognise their continuing connection to land, water, and community. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging.
Indeed. And this week, our thoughts go out to all of the people getting their vaccines.
Yes.
They're happy thoughts.
Including...
They're the thoughts of positivity, a nation commencing their slow wade towards normality.
Herd immunity. That's the goal, isn't it?
That is the goal.
Well, the Prime Minister just got a jab in his arm, Jake.
He did.
It's like breaking news. You may have, in fact, heard it first on the Pouch the podcast. You know, if you're one of those lucky people listening live at the moment, you may actually be experiencing this in real time, that we are breaking the news to you about the fact that the Prime Minister has received a jab in early... It's a surprise vaccination start.
Surprised.
Yeah, I was surprised. So he wasn't the first.
No, that's right. The very first was a World War II survivor in an aged care home.
Yeah.
Jane Malisak, who was alongside Mr. Morrison.
Yeah.
Where
so cool.
Mr. Morrison is there wearing his Australia flag shaped mask, wearing his cricket jersey, what it looks like a cricket jersey, getting his Pfizer vaccine.
He's not wearing a cricket jersey, is he?
I think so.
Oh, he is too. Oh, that's weird. I've got a photo of him in a suit, and then he's got his cricket jersey on. Anyway, quick wardrobe change, and then you get the vaccine. I think that's part of it, actually. I don't think you can get it if you're not wearing a sports shirt.
Yeah, I think you have to be wearing a sports. Yeah.
Unless you're a World War II survivor.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think even the World War II survivors have to put on a jersey.
Well, it's just that Jane didn't, so I'm just making sure she doesn't get into trouble.
Yeah, I think what you can see behind her is there's a jersey draped over the back of that chair.
She wears it under her dress. Yeah.
She wears it.
She wears it all the time.
Inside her heart.
Yeah.
She's
still got her Townsville Crocs basketball jersey on. That's what it is.
Yeah. The Wallabies are close to her chest at all times.
But that's very exciting. So the rollout for the vaccine has started. Roll up, get your vaccines here. And that's quite good, actually, because you roll up your sleeve. Roll up.
You do, yep.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's quite good. Anyway, you can keep that one, world. So you heard it here first. The Prime Minister has had the jab, and so has Jane Malisak, whose name I'm sure you will heard pronounced properly on the evening news tonight. And you can also have roll up, get your vaccines here, which I'm going to call the title of this particular show. So very exciting. I probably won't get more based on the current rollout.
No, it shouldn't actually be that far away, Greg. It's they have a short period of getting the specifically identified people, which are frontline health workers, aged care people, and a few others, like people in hotel quarantine, and then it starts rolling into the more I suppose distributed rollout.
Yeah, and
with the other vaccines as well, with the AstraZeneca.
Okay, so and correct me if I'm wrong, Jake. You're in this space. What I think that we're aiming for 9. You're not in this space.
I'm definitely not in this space. This has nothing to do with me. I'm not speaking from a position of knowledge.
No, but you also are in like a hospital.
I have been in the past. Yes, I have known stuff about healthcare.
And
good, quick recovery.
And I was going to. We're aiming for 90%, aren't we, for herd immunity?
Yeah, they call it herd immunity. I've always preferred the term community immunity, Greg.
Yes, of course.
For many reasons.
Yes.
Mainly the symmetry in my mouth when I say it.
It's a good place for symmetry.
I totally agree.
Not like my teeth. My teeth are certainly not living up to symmetry in my mouth.
No, neither have I in aging, unfortunately. But
jokes that sound rude but aren't really.
Yes. But look, we are aiming for, or Australia is aiming for well over 80%. It's going to be a really interesting pursuit to get to that number. I think they're hoping for many millions to get. I think it was around 1 million people being vaccinated every single week under Greg Hunt, the federal health minister's plan.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's 1 million a day in the States, so 1 million a week in here makes sense. Yep.
Well, yeah, 1 million a day and would be done in 27 days.
That'd be great, wouldn't it? Why do we do that?
A
month.
I mean, we're limited really by the number of vaccines that we have in the country at any one time.
Can you imagine if we did that? Can you imagine being one of the tennis players who are from overseas here at the moment? Not only have we had 0 cases pretty much the whole time they've been here. When we did have 2 cases, the entire country freaked out, right? And then we're back to 0 again. And then imagine if we also vaccinated ourselves while they were still here. So in that whole time, no cases, no community transmission, ran a world-class tournament, and we all got vaccinated. Wouldn't that be great? And then they have to go back to their country where it's all just falling over.
You still have good old Novak Djokovic going, vaccines are awful, they're bad, and I'm going to go back to my country and spread some more COVID.
Does he think they're bad?
Oh, he's just such a weird individual. Yeah, I believe he does. But
okay.
he also.
I don't want to spread that if it's not true, Jake.
Yeah,
is
that's true.
Is that confirmed?
You don't want to be like coronavirus, but no, he did that. He held that tennis tournament where he was essentially disbelieving COVID, essentially saying it's we as athletes, we're not going to get it, no issue.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, a whole bunch of people got it.
Mm. Okay, now this is the tricky part, right? Because we're aiming for this herd immunity, and community immunity, but we also had anti-vaccination protests held in Australia yesterday, right? So protests were held in cities, and just to give credit where credit's due, I'm actually quoting the BBC here. Protests were held in
Australian publication.
Yeah. Whoops. Anyway, Google directed me to the BBC. Protests were held in cities including Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane, with participants chanting slogans like "My body, my choice." And at first I thought that was a bit funny because obviously our vaccine isn't going to be compulsory. However, you may be compulsed to take it if you want to take your kid to childcare, if you want them to enroll in school, if you want to come back into the country after you've been out of the country or going to another country. So there might be some compulsions to do it, but it still won't be mandatory. Interesting discussion. Send us an email at thepouchpodcast@gmail.com if you have thoughts on that. The rallies were largely peaceful, but police made several arrests in Melbourne. Local media reported the national rollout of the Pfizer vaccine is set to begin on Monday. False, BBC. False news. It's set to begin at 1 p.m. on Sunday, the 21st of February.
No, the actual rollout is due to begin.
Shut up. I think that Jane begs to differ, Jake. In Melbourne, some protests clashed with police who used pepper spray and made several arrests.
Spray.
Pepper?
Oh, pepper.
Yeah. Yep.
Prepper spray is way better. It helps you to prepare for things.
See, I like some of these signs.
I'm not ready to do this exam. Quick, squirt some prepper spray in your eyes.
I like these signs that they've got up because they're easy to answer. Like it's got experiment or vaccine ? On one of the big billboards, and you go, well, it's a vaccine.
Vaccine. Yeah.
Next billboard.
It's a great pop quiz. Can I tell you my favourite sign? And every time my daughter's a bit of an activist, burgeoning activist, and we've taken her to a number of various protests over the last couple of years, and my favourite sign that I saw a few years ago, and I've forced her to replicate it every single time, just to bring in a little bit of levity to each of the situations. I saw this sign that said on it, "This is a sign."
Yeah, great. It's perfect.
And it's my favourite thing ever.
But I think you should put a question mark at the end of it.
This is a sign?
Yeah. Australia. Yeah. Okay. So Australia aims to inoculate 4 million people by early March. But yeah, so I don't care. You want the vaccine, take the vaccine, but don't force me to take it. One protester said, we're not forcing anyone to take it. The priority groups in the first, it's good, isn't it? Like they're protesting things that we've already thought about and considered. Isn't that nice? It's almost as if they woke up and thought, geez, we better think about this and test it. Anyway.
Mind you, look, if Linda from the Northern Rivers wants to go back to Bali this year for her tattoo, breast lift, and eyebrow rejuvenation,
yes,
she's going to need to get a vaccine.
That's right.
I think it'll sort itself out. I think it will sort itself out.
And
Greg.
for those of you playing at home, Australia has recorded just under 29,000 cases and 909 deaths since the pandemic began. So kudos to us. Hopefully by October, November, December, we're all inoculated.
And still working from home. That's my goal.
Unforcefully.
That's my goal.
Unfortunately, yeah, the working from home thing. Gosh, I've spoken to a lot of people, hey, and they were pretty on board with the whole working from home thing. I was speaking to someone the other day, and they were saying, that they still get the newspaper delivered to their house from their old owners. So they moved into this house, and the old owners didn't change it. Anyway, so they used to, for a while there, during coronavirus, they were waking up, going outside, getting the newspaper, coming back in, reading the newspaper, and they're like, oh, this is what it's like in the movies. Like, this is amazing.
I know, right?
And now they've got to get back to work, so they have to... They're like, we're up, we're ironing, we're cranky, and we got to go to work, and we come home late at night. It's just, yeah. Anyway, hopefully one of the things that stick around. So, yes, very exciting. Vaccine rollout. The Prime Minister has had a jab, and so has Jane. Whose last name you can hear pronounced correctly on the news this evening, because they're the real journalists here, Jake,
Yeah, Jane.
Now, I do want to touch on something, Jake, just very quickly. One of the biggest stories, one of the biggest stories from the week, will be about, has been and will continue to be about Brittany Higgins. We here at the Pouch the Podcast had an early morning management meeting, and we've decided not to tackle that in any way whatsoever, because we cannot do the heft of this situation justice, and also it's still an unfolding story, and it's probably a little too much of a serious story for a podcast which has not so serious, not so seriously.
It's not a situation to bring levity to, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And
I think it was a very good call.
Yeah, so we're not going to touch on that one, but we do understand that it is a big story. But we're gonna sort of keep that light. But please don't be under any impressions that we're not paying attention to it or making decisions.
She is absolutely believed. We just don't feel that we can do it the justice that we feel is appropriate.
It deserves. That's correct. You can leave that, Jake, to the BBC, not the ABC, because I've lost my script. So I was going to jump to the Facebook thing, but
you can't, because you can't get any of the links out of Facebook.
But I can't. Well, so do you want to touch on it real quick? Do you want to do the Facebook thing? It seems like a nice little segue.
Nice little segue. Yeah, look, absolutely. It's such a wow. It's just so interesting, and I realise that. I have this habit, Greg, of every time we approach a news story, I almost always say, yes, Greg, it's such an interesting story.
Yeah.
But
that's because it is, Jake. That's because we tackle only 3 or 4 stories a week.
Exactly. So, yeah, look, Facebook has made the decision. This is all in the lead up to this new media code of conduct law, which would force the major tech giants, namely Google and Facebook, who have developed essentially they've developed their platforms around in-housing news that is shared on their platform to such an extent that significant numbers of people don't actually click on the story anymore. They just read the headline and whatever the editorial from their friend is on there. Sometimes they click forward, and sometimes they avail themselves of the advertising that is there on the various news websites web page. But a lot of the time, and in Google's case, they've in-housed it. So if you click on the link, it opens it up within a Google thing, and you don't even see the newspaper's advertising. So, look, yes, this is all in the lead up to that new law coming in from Australia. Google is, a week out from that law essentially being seen. I think it's in the upper house at the moment. But yes, a week out from that, Google has decided to have high-level conversations with the Australian newspapers and has decided that they will pursue that.
Yeah, so they've got the news. The Google have got the news showcase product. It's called News Showcase, so it's the new News Showcase, and it's something that you can get. You can download it from Google News on the App Store, and basically that means that the news that you're seeing, they're actually paying those particular journalists.
Journalistic
They're paying
organisations,
those organizations. So it says, we are pleased to reach this agreement with Google because it will allow us to break more stories. This is, sorry, I missed a paragraph. The multi-year commercial agreement was finalized after weeks of negotiation between Google and places like Guardian and the Sydney Morning Herald and a few others as well. So you can actually get that thing. It must be, I don't know what Apple News does. They must already pay them. I don't know, but you do have to get that subscription stuff.
It's mainly the Murdoch papers.
Okay, so
mainly the News Limited papers.
All right. Well, Guardian has also struck a deal with Google as well. So from my perspective, and I might be very much wrong here, correct me if I'm wrong, but my perspective is that Google have actually taken a stride forward towards making sure that Australian news outlets are getting paid and aren't putting up too much of a fuss compared to what Facebook is doing.
Yeah, and we can get into a little bit of the ethics behind it in a minute, but the really the crux of this story is around Facebook pulling the plug. So Facebook has been working with the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, for the last few weeks, directly with the Treasurer. So there's been multiple phone calls with as the Treasurer says, Mr. Zuckerberg. And he says, there's not a huge amount of difference. There's a few $1 billion between both he and the Treasurer. So
that's right.
But
that's
there's
funny.
basically nothing else.
He did say that, didn't he? Frydenberg, Zuckerberg. What's the difference? A few $1 billion.
Exactly.
Yes, funny. God, he's funny, isn't he? Hey?
Yes, just at the right time.
We're looking for a third host.
Let's go straight to him. He unfortunately didn't get to clear that deal though, because essentially Facebook decided that they would pull all news from Australia. All links,
everything
from Australian news websites. They were a little bit heavy-handed, it seems, in their push to sucker punch Australia's news organisations. They blocked charities. They blocked their own pages. They blocked government health websites during a freaking pandemic. They blocked news websites like Bureau of Meteorology. They booked fire and emergency services sites. They were a little bit heavy-handed, it seems, but essentially they were doing it in order to, the government was instituting this media thing in order to, curb some of the power of tech giants, and it seems that one of the tech giants used their powers in an overwhelming and unprecedented show of force.
Look, it was absolutely shocking. Like, when you start agreeing with things that Andrew Bolt has to say, it's pretty bad. He suggested that the tactics used by Facebook are similar to that used by China, and I probably couldn't agree more. Like, I think that that's the case. I think that this is such a corporate flex and a corporate show of might. And I'm so glad that we have a government who's saying, well, we're not going to negotiate with them. And for me, it was pretty shocking. Like, the idea that, there were significant drops in traffic towards news sites. The only real figure that I've got is that ABC News suffered a 30% drop in clicks to their news website as a result of this particular move by Facebook. So you can imagine that the other ones are pretty significant as well. And so 30% in one day is huge. The amount of people not receiving their news on that particular day is huge. And just quickly, we got a comment from Fred Stokes. He said that Thomas Smith's podcast, Opening Arguments, did a great rundown of this, probably the only even-handed coverage of the Facebook issue. He said it's worth a plug because he found us from being on Serious Inquiries, Serious Inquiries only. So thanks for that, Fred. So if you want a pretty good rundown of this, and I
think that's of the law he's referring to.
Yeah, that's right, of the law and what's happening here. Thomas Smith, Opening Arguments is the name of that particular podcast. So more than happy to plug that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so interesting. Any situation that tries to posit, Rupert Murdoch as the person who is the David in the David and Goliath situation, like that
David's
sees essentially
the small one, right?
David is the small one, standing up against the bully.
Goliath.
So
was Goliath a bully?
Goliath. Yeah, it was. Look, it's biblical stories, it's allegory, it's so anyway, take it as you will.
I'm just taking the Mickey. Yep, go.
I get
okay.
it. But I get jokes. But yeah, it's one of these situations. I find it so very difficult, Greg, to have a tremendous amount of empathy for News Limited, and for Rupert Murdoch's organisation. I certainly, I've complained over the years about the types of journalism that we have in Australia, and certainly the editorial, the editorial edge that people like Rupert Murdoch and others certainly have in their news organisations around essentially pushing a particular line, particularly when it comes to left-wing or right-wing politics, depending on who Murdoch favours at any time in the political cycle. But invariably, I kind of feel like there are laws that could have done this better.
Okay.
There was the law posited, or the proposal posited by former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, who essentially said that all advertising around journalism on websites could be pulled together and could be accessed to essentially fund public interest journalism. I think that's a vastly better law than the one that's been proposed, at least on the face of it. But either way, on the face of it, it is so difficult to go past the premise that Murdoch is the hero of this story. That Murdoch is, and the many fine journalists behind that organisation are invariably, they are the ones that are going to win out of such a proposed law, and it is extraordinarily difficult to think of them as the good guys.
Yeah, I can imagine that it is difficult. I suppose, on the other hand, we don't want to paint some of the hardworking journalists at the Murdoch Press with that particular brush as well. I suppose it's a bit of a catch-22 for them to be working for Murdoch papers and things like that, particularly when there are some good journalists out there. But anyway, it is an interesting discussion. I think that it'll be great to see how this one pans out. I suppose I say great in the sense that it sounds like our government's not going to be pandering to the bullyingness anytime soon, which is decent.
I was so enamored by what Scott Morrison said in this regard. He said something to the order of, if you want to live and work in Australia, if you want to sell to Australians, if you want to operate in the Australian economy, we have rules and laws. If you want to operate by those rules and laws, you are welcome to come and sell to us. You are welcome to come and operate in this economy. Yeah, but not if you don't.
No, that's exactly right.
Loved it.
Yes, and okay, so that would be probably the second biggest story from this week, and then you've got the vaccinations as well on top of that. So 2 or 3 huge stories this week happening in Australia, but we're gonna take a little flight now, Jake. If you want to pull your seat back and you want to put your AirPods in.
Tray table up in the upright position.
No. Bring the tray table down. Try and figure out how your head can rest on the tray table. That's always a fun way to spend 3 hours on a flight. Different positions.
And then you sit up and can't feel your neck and
or your legs.
Get to your destination and
wobble off the plane. Yeah, so just
go
relax.
Into hospital because you're in traction and
We're gonna fly the nose of the plane, if you will, Jake, through the bubble, through the Trans-Tasman bubble, and we're gonna fly over to New Zealand, and we're gonna have a chat with Jacinda Ardern. So New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has criticised Australia for stripping dual national terror suspects' citizenship. A Melbourne woman who had her Australian citizenship cancelled last year is at the centre of a political spat between Australia and New Zealand after New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern accused Scott Morrison of I don't even know what that word is. What is that word?
An
abrogation of responsibility over her case. I'm going to suggest that abrogation means to let go of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To shirk
the Latin term for legal annulment under Roman law. The ending or setting aside of Old Testament stipulations for the New Testament. Goodness me. Okay.
Abrogated.
Right. I'm going to use that in my classroom tomorrow. Abrogate you of your responsibility to use a ruler.
You can only ask to go to the toilet once. Any more than once is an abrogation
of your responsibility and your bladder. Now, to your bladder. Go.
Yep.
Hit us with the facts, Jake. The FATC, facts.
Fats.
The
I like
facts.
it.
The fat
Fat
facts.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, look, it is really interesting. Oh, damn it, I did it again. A Melbourne woman who had, yes, as you said, her Australian citizenship cancelled last year is at the centre of a political spat between Australia and New Zealand after New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern accused Scott Morrison of this abrogation of responsibility over this specific case. We have discussed this previously on the show, where essentially Australia, if you come from another country and you live here in Australia, even if you gain citizenship in Australia, if you commit a serious crime, you can be deported to your country of origin. Now, where this takes the most effect is between Australia and New Zealand. There are plenty of people who have arrived here as children or arrived here as adolescents or adults, have committed a serious crime, and at the end of their judicial proceedings, at the end of their jailing, they are sent back to New Zealand because that is their country of origin. That is their country where they hold their birth citizenship, I suppose. So there is this particular case. Oh, and I should say, and New Zealand doesn't like it.
No.
And
they've been quite vocal about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
She embarrassed our Prime Minister in the front of Sydney Opera House,
Absolutely.
Dare she?
He was chilly. She was fine. And do you remember that chilly reception? It was quite a cold day. The Prime Minister's shivering, sitting there shivering, and she's there. Oh, look, this is a freaking summer day.
She's from New Zealand. Yeah.
But so it's one of those situations in this case where a woman she's been accused of committing terror offences, and essentially she's been sent back to New Zealand, and New Zealand are not happy about it for many reasons. A lot of the reasons why in the past New Zealand have been unhappy with these types of cases are because again, as I suggested in the opening, the individuals come here as a child. They've spent all of their life building a life in Australia. Now, given some of that life may not have been great for that person or for Australia, but invariably all of their social connections, all of their familial connections have been established, all of their business connections, they've all been established in Australia. So if that person is to have any chance of reintegration back into society, it would be through leaning on those familial and friendship-based connections. But sending her back to the country of her origin essentially means that she has to completely start afresh in a completely foreign country where she has no assets, where she has no home, where she potentially has no connections. And it is very difficult. And, you could imagine that might lead that individual to a sincere amount of, frustration, anger, et cetera, and potentially escalate, an already reasonably escalated situation.
Yeah. All right. So give us a little bit of her background. How did she end up in this particular situation? So her name is Suhaira Aden. Tell us a little. Can you give us a little bit of background as to what happened here and how she ended up in custody?
Yep. So she was she was a dual citizen of Australia and New Zealand. She travelled to Syria from Australia in 2014 to live under IS, Islamic State.
Yep.
And while there, she married and had 3 children. She didn't. To 2 Swedish men who unfortunately both died in that situation. One of her children also unfortunately died of pneumonia while in Syria. And essentially because of her association, because she went to Syria to be a part of that conflict, and because of the rules that Australia puts around people who leave for a foreign conflict, essentially when you do that, you are designated an enemy of the state. You are designated terrorist by association. Whether or not you commit terrorist acts, essentially you are implicated in that premise.
Okay, all right. So it does say here on Monday evening, news broke that she had been detained by Turkish authorities. So she tried to enter Turkey, and her 2 children, aged 2 and 5, were detained with her. The Turkish Defense Ministry said that 3 New Zealand nationals trying to enter our country from Syria illegally were caught by our border staff, and it was determined that a 26-year-old woman named S.A., who was among those arrested, was a terrorist from Daesh, the other name for the Arabic term for Islamic State. So then what happened there? So she was put on a plane and sent to New Zealand? Or so Miss Ardern said that the woman had left New Zealand for Australia when she was 6 and departed for Syria from Australia on an Australian passport. Our very strong view on behalf of New Zealand was that this individual was clearly most appropriately dealt with in Australia. So is she in New Zealand now?
I believe she's still in Turkey.
Right, okay.
Essentially, and Turkey's trying to figure out, look, it's not our problem. Turkey's saying she's not our problem.
Right.
She's Australia's problem. But Australia is saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We have removed her from our citizenship. She is stateless unless New Zealand claim her because of her that's where she was born.
Okay.
Then she is effectively stateless, which
and her children. Her 2 children are with her as well. Okay. Yeah. So the situation is that she was born in New Zealand.
Yep.
Moved to Australia, became an Australian citizen, went to Turkey. Went to Syria, and then was under Daesh. Lost both her husbands. Lost a child. Has 2 children. Then was entering Turkey, and they arrested her there, and she's now detained in Turkey. They are saying that she's a New Zealand citizen, and Jacinda Ardern is saying that shouldn't be the case, that she should be an Australian citizen, and it should be Australia to deal with that. Scott Morrison has said that it was part of the automatic process. It was almost like an automation that her citizenship with Australia was cancelled as a result of the Islamic State Association. Is that your understanding as well?
That is my understanding as well.
Yeah. Okay. So now it really has fallen on to New Zealand because they don't cancel citizenships in that way. Whereas you can't. I mean, essentially. So if a person born in Australia goes to Islamic State, they are not able to have their citizenship revoked. Yes.
Cancelled. Because you are not allowed to make a person stateless.
Right. Yes. Okay.
But because this individual has a second place of origin,
right,
or a second place of residence,
yep.
She's able to do that.
Okay. All right. A very interesting one. I'm sure you've got a few comments about that. You can email us at thepouchpodcast@gmail.com.
It is a real murky one. It's one of those scenarios where it is reasonable what New Zealand have said.
Yeah.
It is reasonable the way that they've acted and responded. And likewise, you can understand the Australian position. We don't want people who have been necessarily we don't necessarily want people who have been radicalized by a violent war-based area and regime is what I'm trying. Regime was the word I was looking for.
Islamic State.
You don't necessarily want that person settling back in Australia unless they have had some form of de-radicalization that has been shown to be successful.
Yeah, well,
because invariably they are going back into a community where they can access, young people and potentially radicalize them, and nobody wants that.
No one. Not many people in Australia, anyway. Let me. I think it's important to take a minute just to read the quote from Scott Morrison. He said, "It's my job as the Australian Prime Minister to put Australia's national security interests first. I think all Australians would agree with that. The legislation that has passed through our parliament automatically cancels the citizenship of a dual citizen where they've been engaged in terrorist activities of this nature. Now, I understand that the New Zealand government has some issues with that. Australia's interest here is that we do not want to see terrorists who fought with terrorism organisations enjoying privileges of citizenship, which I think they forfeit the second they engage as an enemy of our country. So that's his full statement there. And it does go on to say, this particular ABC News article does go on to say that more than 60 Australian women and children have been held in detention camps in Syria's northeast since the fall of Islamic State in Syria in 2019. 3 of them have since had their Australian citizenship stripped because they hold another nationality. So you hit the nail on the head there, Jake. Gosh, you're a man of knowledge.
It's still, you can understand the plight of the families of these of the people who have gone over to fight in this war or to be brides of people who have fought in this war. The family, and I've heard there's a particular father, I can't recall the name of the person who he was advocating for, but his daughter. But the father was, dealing with an incredible situation where the children of his daughter are stuck in a Syrian detention camp or a Syrian camp where they don't get enough food, they don't have any clothing, they don't have access to housing, they're staying in tents, and yet they've got grandparents who love them very much in Australia and want to take care of them, but because of the situation that those children have been put in by invariably a person who's decided to go and contribute to terrorism and a war. Because of that, those kids are stuck in those camps.
Yeah, that idea of the children has really hit home to me. It's pretty shocking to think that these kids are also in detention with their mum as well. So
it is.
Yep, that's no good. It's certainly a tricky one, I suppose. The precedent for Australia is obviously the boats and not, we don't report on how many boats we've got. You just get knocked back and away you go and you get taken to, what is it, like America or the detention camps around. So you sort of just become a nobody and there's no news about you at all. We're sort of taking a similar approach with these sorts of situations as well. In that, we've got to send a message to say that this is a no-go and we certainly don't encourage you to do this at all. And if you do, there's going to be severe consequences. I don't know about the children's situation. I'm sure that causes plenty of politicians sleepless nights about grappling with that one. Whether or not you can offer to bring them here, I don't know. But anyway, who knows?
No simple solution anyway.
No, there's certainly not a simple solution, Jake. I mean, if we can't figure it out, surely no one can.
Exactly. I totally agree. Greg, I have a surprise news story.
Way! Let me hit the surprise news story button. Surprise news!
Surprise news story. Yeah,
with Jake.
With Jake and Greg. It's an exciting one, Greg.
Okay, that's good.
It's super exciting.
We should release a podcast with just the boring stories.
Yeah, I agree. That would be a revelatory podcast. I feel like it would be an abrogation of our responsibility as podcasters. But look, a slight update in the story of the gentleman who was once egged by one egg boy.
Yeah.
The former senator, Fraser Anning.
Yes.
He was being fined a penalty of $26,660 for failing to lodge an annual financial return for the 2018-19 financial year, which is when he was a senator.
Right.
And that is a violation of his duties as a senator. And he was being fined this amount by the Australian Electoral Commission. And the Australian Electoral Commission this week, Greg, announced that they would not be pursuing that.
No.
Why do you think they wouldn't pursue that, Greg? What reason could you give as somebody who hypothetically worked in the Australian Electoral Commission? What reason would you give for not pursuing that fine that by all rights should be paid?
Well, to be fair, he's got to get his revenge on Egg Boy, so he's probably
that's true.
He's got to buy a lot of chickens.
Yep, $26,000 worth of chickens.
He's got to spend the $26,000 on the chickens.
Yeah.
And they've gone, well, that's fair enough. I mean, he's paid his dues, right?
Yeah. That's not it, Greg. Okay. What other reason do you reckon?
Well, he's just going to have to volunteer to work for the commission during election time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
He'll wash dishes.
just he runs the polls. He's just got to do that for the next 20 years to make up for it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's not it. They just couldn't find him.
What?
So they've decided not to pursue the 26,000.
Is that because of Google going down, or is
they just couldn't find? They looked on Facebook, couldn't find any links to his location, so they closed it.
It's considered.
No, they couldn't find him. Apparently, he's headed over to the United States to.
He's done a runner.
Yeah, he's gone to buy white bed sheets and
he's hanging out with Malcolm Turnbull over in the States. He's staying in Malcolm's apartment.
Not sure that they hang out in the same circles.
Well, you never know. You never know these days. Malcolm's got it in for everyone at the moment.
That's true.
It's pretty funny. Okay, well, thanks for that. Okay, so they just can't find him. So
they can't find him, so they've dropped this massive fine.
Fair enough. Well, I do know that if you have like a HEX debt and you go and work overseas, they don't track you down to pay your HEX debt. You can basically get a free degree that way. You just, the punishment is you have to live in another country.
The second that you step foot back in Australia, you still have to pay that amount of money.
Yeah.
And, things like the robo-debt, look, I just thought it was quite interesting where we do have a situation where many Australians are being charged, quite a bit of money for things that they essentially didn't do under the robo-debt scheme. They weren't responsible for paying back money because they didn't have to, they were well within their rights to have denied those amounts of money. But Fraser Anning, former senator, decides he doesn't want to pay $26,000 and, didn't respond to his phone, didn't respond to his texts or emails.
Can't find him. Why not?
Yep.
It's either spend $50,000 trying to find him, which is just it's a mammoth task, isn't it? You need to hire the man who knows all the karate moves, and then you've got to, get them on a plane. They usually fly privately.
Got to get a tracker.
You got to get a tracker. It's just a mess. It's a mess. Yep. It's an absolute mess.
You're right.
You need all the gadgets to track you.
Yeah, that's true.
You need the watch and the poison
satellite
pen.
Tracking.
Yes.
You're right, Greg. They did save about $25,000 in not doing that.
Well, I would say millions, Jake.
Yeah, true.
The fancy cars, the explosions, the lawsuits, all sorts of things trying to track him down.
All of those things.
Yeah, all of those things. It
So
costs a fortune. Fred Stokes has agreed with you, Jake, about your analysis of the Facebook problem. That he said the biggest worry is the thresholds. It sort of entrenches existing media instead of helping any small players. And he said that you said it well. The idea is right, but the implementation is a big worry. Thanks, Fred Stokes.
Thanks, Fred.
We're Fred
Thank
Stoked.
you for validating me.
Absolutely. And if you want to validate Jake, you can do so by heading to thepatchthepodcast.com or telling anyone to go there, really, where you can tell them to subscribe. Just tell them to subscribe. Just go subscribe, and then they'll do it.
Yeah.
And
just
Jake,
shout it at them and walk away. Subscribe.
It's not the end of the episode, Jake, but do you want to just give our Patreon a quick plug?
I would love that. Yeah,
Go.
Yes. If you are interested if you do enjoy the show and you'd like to contribute,
even if you don't enjoy the show,
exactly.
Yeah.
But you would
if
like
you hate the show,
and you would like to continue, you would like to contribute to the continuing running of it, please do go to patreon.com/The Pouch the Podcast and join some others who have decided
Fred Stokes is one.
That we are worthy of their fine dollaries.
Absolutely.
Dollary dues. So
now you can.
yes, please.
They did announce that Patreon are going to. We can do it in Australian dollars now too. So I'll make sure I make the switch to that one very shortly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. So you can do that if you're not ready for that level of intimacy, not ready to say, hey, Jake and Greg, we love you, but look,
my money's mine.
We're down for the free stuff. Okay, that's fine. If you could if you do us a very small favor and do write a favorable review and comment on your podcast aggregator of choice, and it really helps to other people to find the show, and of course it does make us feel warm and fuzzy as well.
Now, Jake, I'm going to let you choose. We've spoken about a couple of other stories that weren't in the script, so I'm going to let you choose one state politics one. Which one do you want to do?
Great question, Greg. Great question. I reckon let's talk Western Australia.
Okay, let's do Western Australia. Do you want to spin the wheel and see if it lands
I'd
on
love
Western
to.
Australia? Okay, go.
It landed on Western Australia.
Oh my god. I can't
know.
believe it.
Serendipity.
That is just serendipitous, isn't it?
Yeah, we did. We chose the story that would be from Western Australia. I spun the wheel of states and
territories of
and territories.
state and territory
and,
states.
And it got there, Greg.
Insane.
I mean,
it's absolutely insane. There's someone watching over us, Jake.
I know. It's like creepy.
It is.
But
I got goosebumps or goose pimples, as I learned that they call it. Yeah,
yes.
in America.
Indeed.
Chicken skin.
Goose flesh.
They call it chicken skin.
Flesh.
Yeah, goose flesh, chicken skin, goose pimples.
Yeah,
goosebumps. Anyway, all right. So
need better words for these leagues.
They really do. They really do. Does an impending LNP shellacking in Western Australia spell danger for the feds? Dun dun dun. Not danger for the feds. Oh no.
Yeah. Look, we can answer this one really quickly, which is why I chose it. The answer is probably not.
Okay.
So
it's hyperbole,
it's one of those things.
Clickbait.
There is probably very little chance of the Liberal National Party, overcoming all of the odds and triumphing against the Michael Gunner government in Western Australia.
All right, well, hit me. What's happening? The alarm bells are starting to ring. I can hear them.
Indeed. Well, it is so very, very, very likely. It is so very likely. Did I say Gunner? Who did I mean? Who is the Western Australian Premier? Why did I not write that in the
what's his name?
It's not Gunner, is it?
No. It's
That's Northern Territory.
What's his name? Gary. I don't know. You do this to me all the time. Western Australian.
It's freaking Mark McGowan.
Yeah, Mark McGowan.
How did I forget that? How did
it's
I?
Easy to forget,
Greg?
Jake. It's an easy name
These
to forget.
Are all,
it's not like he's in the
news
anytime.
These are the things that are meant to stay in the head. Greg.
You know what? I keep thinking I need a list of premiers
just
on my speaker here, right on my screen here.
Yeah.
I should have had
I'm down with you.
Not like we're on a political podcast. Okay, Mark McGowan, go.
Yeah, so Mark McGowan is predicted to triumph in the upcoming Western Australian election on March 13th.
What?
It is very likely, in fact, that the Liberal National Party will lose seats. This really reflects exactly the same thing that has happened around Australia for elections that occurred late last year and early this year.
Yes.
In that incumbents have been sincerely favoured. Why? Because invariably they have protected their state, their citizenship from the coronavirus.
Yes,
and they have.
And Australia loves it. Australia loves
Australia
nipping
loves
that coronavirus in the bud.
But aside from that, they're loving stability in a crisis.
Oh, they love it, Jake. They love stability.
That's what an intelligent person would do. Is
Absolutely.
That they would go towards the more stable option when things outside of that sphere were not so stable. So it makes perfect sense. Now,
yes.
Essentially this story was all about a question of are we predicting that the Liberal National Party losing the Western Australian election so much, so severely, as per the
landslide. We're calling it now.
Landslide. Calling it ahead of time.
It's a blue wave.
Is it likely? Yeah, blue wave. Is it likely? Actually, it's the exact opposite. It'll be a red wave hitting up against a very small. It's a red tidal wave hitting up against the shores of a blue mollusk.
It is.
About to be inundated. But
it's Red October. That's what they call it.
Exactly. I'm sure that's what.
I don't know when the election is. Anyway, yeah.
But look, it's an interesting situation. A lot of people are asking, does this spell trouble for the federal Liberal National Party?
No.
And essentially, the answer is no. If anything, if the Prime Minister were to call an election today, you've got the Labor Party without a tangible platform in federal politics. and invariably he is the incumbent. He has steered Australia, despite the fact that he probably hasn't done a tremendous amount as the Prime Minister. It's all up to the states, etc., as he made that very clear. There have been some federal programs such as JobKeeper, which was tremendously successful and important to keeping people in their jobs.
Yes.
So that they could remain in those jobs when we come out of, or when we came out of the more intense situations.
Yes.
It is most likely that he would retain the prime ministership if it were held right now. But that's, anyway, it's fine that we ask these questions, but invariably it is most likely that given that the Liberal National Party has a primary vote, Greg, of only 23% in Western Australia, that the Western Australian government is going to absolutely trounce. Absolutely trounce.
Now, gamble responsibly, but it might be time to fire up those sports bets accounts. We've called it. We've called it. There might be, you could make a little bit of Bitcoin on this one maybe. Now, Jake, I do agree with you. And one thought that's popped into my head while you've been speaking is that really sort of the coronavirus is, I get the feeling that because it's been handled so well by so many different people, that it really doesn't matter about the party politics of it, in the sense that it's just favouring the incumbent of all states. Like, it's just favouring the incumbent all round, isn't it?
It really, really does. I mean, if you can point to one thing, we're not an American politics podcast, so I don't want to dwell on this, but one of the reasons that has been touted as why Donald Trump had such a tremendous
fall from grace. Yep.
Well, he had regardless of whether he won or not.
I don't know. It wasn't really a fall from grace, was it?
Well, he got more votes than he did last election, and he got more votes than pretty well any incumbent president in history.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that the other person, Biden, obviously got more votes and won more electoral college seats. But aside from that, the reason that he did get, many commentators are saying that the reason why Trump did get so many votes, despite doing apparently such a poor job among so many measures, is because of that incumbency factor. People wanted to retain who was in there to limit the amount of change in their lives. Despite the fact that, change may have saved their lives and, various other things, people do tend to vote in a way that retains the situation as much as possible, even if that situation isn't necessarily great.
Exactly. And when you've got the situation where you've got...
Yes, when you've got the situation where you've got...
That's right. When you've got the situation that you've got, Jake, there's no other situation to get, because that's the one that you've got. Yeah. What am I thinking? I'm thinking about the fact that, you have sort of left-leaning people obviously voting for the status quo. And that's not something, generally speaking, that the left are sort of associated with, right? So, they often want particularly progressive change, what they call progressive change, and those sorts of things. So the fact that people are going, hang on, this is working pretty well. Let's keep it the way that it is. It's almost like the seed of conservatism is being planted in a lot of left-leaning people as well, which is an interesting approach, I guess. That's just a thought that I've had. How much credence it has, who knows? Now, Jake, I've been looking up Mark McGowan on Wikipedia just to make sure that he